What is a categorical imperative? It's an idea by the German idealist Immanuel Kant. And the categorical imperative is acting the way you want others to act. And it's based on the idea of on the principle of universalizability, which says that an action is only moral if everyone doing it would not harm society. The categorical imperative is a moral principle which denotes that you should act only in accordance with a maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law, meaning that you should act a certain way only if you're willing to have everyone else act the same way too. For example, when it comes to relationships, the categorical imperative means that you should avoid being rude to people unless you want everyone to be rude to each other. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. So the categorical imperative is a moral principle that is absolute, meaning that it should be followed by all rational beings and that following it should be seen as a goal in itself. The categorical imperative is one of the best known moral principles to ever be formulated and can be useful in a variety of contexts, so it is important to understand it as such. Okay, so I think you get the idea. It's a principle of reciprocity. Do unto others as you would others do unto you, and all things being equal, we would reach a happier society if we did act to others as we would wish others to do unto us. But what is a moral imperative? There's a slight... Well, I'm not actually sure myself. I mean, I think, I think it means the same thing. But I'm going to go to Wikipedia for a clearer definition, and it does say a moral imperative is a strongly felt principle that compels that person to act. It is a kind of categorical imperative as defined by Immanuel Kant. Kant took the imperative to be a dictate of pure reason. So what is an imperative? An imperative is an order, basically. Let me look up the word for you. It's something that is compelled or ordered, absolutely necessary or required. Kant took the imperative to be a dictate of pure reason in its practical aspect. Not following the moral law was seen to be self-defeating and thus contrary to reason. Later thinkers took the imperative to originate in conscience as a divine voice speaking through the human spirit. The dictates of conscience are simply right and often resist further justification. Looked at another way, the experience of conscience is the basic experience of encountering the right. So we now come to an example of what is not following the moral imperative. An example of not following a moral imperative is making a promise that you do not intend to keep in order to get something, i.e. lying. But let us return to the idea of something that you have to do. there are lots of things that we are told we have to do that we don't want to do, and sometimes we don't do it, and maybe we get away with it, and maybe we don't. So it's something that should have an effect on our conscience, if we have a conscience. So, I suppose you could say to people like, you have a moral imperative to do X. I know you don't want to do it, but, if you're a person who is honest and rational and moral, you should do it. And the person still doesn't want to do it, and, there's going to be a tussle between you and that person about whether to do it or not, and, I guess he'll get annoyed at you for banging on about it. But you hope they will see reason. But there's no guarantee of it. So you can only hope and pray that there are enough people left in the world who understand the moral imperative and are motivated by it. So while we know that sometimes we do things that is against our conscience, we can choose not to go against our conscience anymore and do the right thing. But what if we fear to do it? What if we just don't have a good feeling about it? Well, you could talk it over with me and be honest about what you fear might happen, and maybe, it won't seem as bad as you think it is. But the point of all these little ideas about, the categorical or moral imperative is that if most people, most of the time, did the right thing, well, what a wonderful world we would have. And when you think of the definitions of, what not following your moral imperative is, it's about lying. It's about denying reality and distorting reality. And in the end, it will come back and bite you on the bum if you deny reality, if you ignore reality. And I suppose that there'll be people who say, well, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm not really that important. But I think if we are moving towards a better world, or wanting to behave better, or wanting our society to be better and be governed by the right people, we have to ourselves try to do better and try to do the right thing. And ultimately it begins with ourselves. We resolve issues by deciding on a particular course of action, which hopefully will be the right course, the moral course of action, and if enough people think like this and do the right thing, then eventually everything will be sorted. And some people are more important than others because they occupy key positions when they are, ideally placed to, accomplish certain objectives. And what if you still don't want to do it? I suppose you would have to. You see, this is when belief in the afterlife is so important. It's like, well, okay, if you don't believe that you're going to have an afterlife, then obviously anything inconvenient that happened to you is, well, it's something you don't want to happen to you, because there's no payoff, because this is, your only life, and there is no afterlife, and there will be no reward for good or punishment for evil ever. But even so, we do have a moral imperative to behave as if we believed that there is an afterlife, to keep our group in existence and apart from others, because it is only through behaving reasonably well, or as well as we can be, that makes all the good turns that we do worthwhile, that some of the good that we do gets reciprocated, and because of that enough people will think it's worthwhile behaving well. But if it's the other way around, and good is never rewarded and evil never punished, then people will just do whatever they like, and life will just become more chaotic and criminal. And that's why people should do the right thing when they can, and when really there is nothing else to do but the right thing. Why would you want to do the wrong thing or not do the right thing? Well, I find it strange anyway that people are so often morally apathetic and unable to go the whole hog, to break on through to the other side. And I think that's really all I wanted to say. I hope it made some sense. I hope it will have some effect on the key person that needs to do the right thing. And well, fingers crossed that the right thing will be done by the right person, causing a chain of events to occur, leading to the desired conclusion through acting on what is the irresistible nature of the categorical imperative. Thank you for your attention.